Robert Mailing with the Sioux Empire Podcast, and I'm here with Paul TenHaken, candidate for Sioux Falls Mayor.
Hey, Robert. How are you, man?
Very good. Let's go ahead and jump right in here. Do you have any kind of opening statement or like reason you're running or kind of like thesis for your whole campaign?
Yeah, no, a great question. That's usually the question people want to ask is like, how did you get into this? Like, why did you decide to do this? And especially for me, because I'm 40, I'm kind of at a halftime of life. I got 3 young kids, and really the short answer is I just have a real passion to serve right now. I have a passion to do this. You know, leaving the private sector, leaving a company I started in 08 called Click Rain, and walked away from that this past year, named a new CEO just because I really felt the desire to help lead the city. And so I know that sounds very romantic and it's a very politician-y answer, but I feel called to serve people and help people. And so I started looking at this race about 3 years ago already. Started meeting with former councilors and former mayors and different city leaders and trying to determine if this was right, if the timing was right. Because doing something like this is a few different factors. It's timing is one, and do you think you could do the job? You know, you have to really be self-aware with yourself to say, can I actually do this?
Yeah.
And also the stage that you're at with your career and your personal life. All these things kind of have to coalesce and like come together.
Absolutely.
And they did. And so talked a lot with my wife, prayed about it a lot, and we decided to do it. I say we because it was a Paul and Jill decision. Absolutely. That's my wife, Jill. So, yeah.
Very good. First question, these are kind of composite questions from our listeners.
Sure.
So I may have consolidated them a bit or cleaned them up, but these are listener sourced. The first question is, what would you do to protect public input?
So public input is a sacred part of the government process. And so public input is not going to be threatened under me. Now, what is a little bit disconcerting at times is the vitriolic nature that starts to come out in public input. So I'm not just expecting lollipops and roses, in public input. You expect to hear from people honestly, and you expect them to say what's on their mind. But you also need to do those things in a cordial fashion. And sometimes I think we cross that line a little bit. There's certain ways I would never speak to someone. I would never speak to you in certain ways just because I have respect for you, even though we haven't known each other long.
Sure.
I think the same respect should be required of public officials. So public input will stay. It's got to be at the front of the meeting. I also believe in that. I mean, there's talk about moving it to the back, and it used to be at the back. I don't think that's fair either. And so I would love to keep the exact same format, the exact same style, but I also want to make sure it remains cordial and civil and respectful of the people on the other side of the dais, and vice versa, that the people on the other side of the dais are being respectful to those who are contributing public input. Great example was 2 weeks ago when Rick Kiley was chairing the meeting. We had about an hour 20 minutes maybe of public input surrounding icon noise ordinances.
Yeah.
It was great. I thought the people, the way they presented themselves was very professional. The way Council Chair Kiley spoke back to the people was very respectful, and that's an emotional issue. That icon thing is an emotional issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that downtown group, man, that community, and they are a community, is, they're motivated and they're cohesive. And,
they are.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is, and Kylie said at the end, he's like, this is city government in action. I love this. Great points you guys made. We hear ya. And it sounds like we're working towards a solution on this thing. So it's like, man,
democracy working.
Yeah, it actually does work when you have cordiality on both sides. Oh.
Excellent. Let's see. What would you do to increase government transparency?
Man, the topic du jour, a lot of things. I think we've had a lot of missteps on this topic with the current administration. And the first thing, which I know is what a lot of candidates are saying, is we want to increase access to the mayor's office. So for me, what that means is providing actual office hours for people to sign up and come meet with me. And I'm going to have those office hours every week. And so you want 10, 15 minutes with the mayor, go through the mayor's office, sign up for a slot, and we can meet one-on-one instead of this public input. You talk at me and I just sit there and can't respond. I want to have a conversation. Tell me why you're so passionate about this. What's your background? Why are you so passionate about arts or downtown music or whatever it is? So giving people better access to their government officials is one. The second thing is, I think some of the protected pieces that we've been concerned about, the RFP and RFQ process, where we've intentionally kept things private, that in my opinion they don't need to be private. I mean, there are certain things that do need to be kept confidential, but there are other things that don't, and if they don't need to be and it won't hurt the integrity of the process by releasing it, release it.
And the ambiguity with that, with like just that most recent example with Joe Snevy and the whole that disclosure about the railroad.
The developers, exactly. It's like, what, that does not harm the process, that does not hurt the integrity of the process, and so it does us no good to dig our heels in and say we're going to release this and then do a 180 and then actually do it, and now we have egg on our face as the city for something that was preventable in the first place. So I think there's a lot of things like that we can do differently. I also want to have a better relationship with some of our counselors, and make sure we're meeting more regularly. And so I'm sitting across the table from these counselors on a more consistent basis, understanding, why are you going to vote this way on Tuesday? Tell me your thoughts. Why are you against this TIF? Why are you for the parking ramp? Why are you against? Why are you for this? So that when we get to Tuesday night, at least, I'm not saying we're going to agree all the time, but at least I understand where that person is coming from. And I think that will provide a level of transparency as well to people, because they'll know that their city government is talking, and working together.
Very good. With this question, you can go as long or as short as you want. I've had people spend 5 minutes on this question. I've had people that spent 45 minutes on this question.
It won't be 45.
You can cut it off wherever you want, is what I'm saying. Because I know you have a written and published out plan.
Yeah.
What are your goals if elected?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with what you just mentioned, in that I spent a lot of time putting together a 2026 plan, and that's what I'm calling it, which is what the next 8 years of a TenHaken administration could look like if I get the opportunity to serve the city. And that outlines 13 things. It's probably too many in a plan because it's a lot to get done. But you want to talk about transparency. I put everything out there for God and everybody to read. And I tell you what, in 4 years, if I get elected and have a chance to rerun, people are going to be re-earthing that document, unearthing it and saying, okay, this is what he said. Did he do this stuff? Did he commit to what he said he was going to do? And so there's a lot of discussion on, should I put myself out there like this and put myself out there with these positions, but I did. And it's been well received, because I think that again demonstrates transparency. It's like, man, this guy is an open book with what he wants to do and what his priorities are. The three that I'll talk about, first one is the narcotics growth in the city. I'll be honest, that wasn't priority number one when I initially got into this race. But the more I have met with people and dug into the issues, that narcotics growth issue has a thread that's woven through many of our challenges in the city. Workforce challenge, poverty challenge, affordable housing challenge, crime. There's this narcotics issue. And so I'm ready to tackle this narcotics problem. And people assume that when you say, well, I'm going to get tough on crime and I'm going to tackle narcotics and get tough on drugs, that doesn't just mean war on drugs and enforcement and more cops and locking up people for smoking a joint. And that's not what that means. What it means is we need to have, a reasonable enforcement angle, and it's specifically on those more dangerous drugs. People say that these are nonviolent offenses. I'll argue that people who are on meth do crazy things, and it is a violent offense, even though the act of doing meth itself is not violent, the results of it are, versus like marijuana and some others. Opioids, heroin, the stuff that happens with those drugs, those are dangerous drugs. So one, we need to have strong enforcement measures on those. But the two things that we often don't talk about when we talk about fighting drugs is the prevention piece, which I think we could do a lot better on. I think the city could fund better. I think the city could work more collaborative with our school district on the prevention message we're putting in the school district. but then the rehabilitation piece and the treatment piece. And I had the chance to meet with a guy who was locked up in the state pen for dealing meth. I met him. We spent 2 hours at a Caribou. He's actually become a real good friend of mine through this campaign now. Good dude. But he's arrested like 36, 37 times before he finally got out of this cyclical drug problem. So he's like, Paul, you're not going to incarcerate you out of this problem. He's like, look at me. What do you think that guy cost our county, state, city, police, courts, drug court, bond hearings that he's missing, jail cells?
What it's done to his life and the lives of the people around him. Because,
totally.
There's a ripple effect with, like, loved ones and stuff like that there.
And he was a dealer. He was a big dealer. And it wasn't until he got arrested and went to federal prison he got the right treatment options. And he got out of the cyclical problem of addiction. So I am a big fan of treatment and rehabilitation options. And what does that look like? I don't know yet. And I'll be just transparent, going back to that. You're not going to have all the answers day one, but people need to know that that's a priority of mine. So I want to look at how our county and our state can work more closely with our city with treatment options. Do we need a dedicated treatment facility, a state, county, city funded treatment facility that serves the region, that works with the nonprofits like Keystone and Carroll Institute and some of those sorts of places? I don't know, but we can't just talk about the enforcement piece without also talking about that prevention and that rehab piece. Second issue is our workforce challenge of our city. And if we do not solve our workforce shortage problem in Sioux Falls, it probably has the potential to be the biggest threat to our city in the next decade, economic threat. Because we continue to have a challenge recruiting and retaining young people to stay in Sioux Falls. Especially if they don't have a connection here. If they're from, Boulder, Colorado, and they came to Augie for 4 years, and we're not keeping a lot of those people. And so my company, my background, the last 10 years I spent running a digital marketing company called ClickRain. So we were talking nerd talk, code, agile development talk before. But we had 36 employees when I left there, and the oldest was 43. So I have a strong background in recruiting and retaining young people. And that's going to be a critical skill set for our next mayor, to understand how do we craft a city, a culture here, the amenities, the jobs that a young workforce is looking for. And so I just see that as a really critical issue to the city. And every business I go to, was at one today, I was at Vast Broadband talking to them. Workforce is one of their biggest challenges to growth.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, and you know this, the world you're at in tech as well. I mean, these software engineers, web developers, they're hard to find.
Yes, they are.
Very hard to find. Because you can chase bigger paychecks in Minneapolis, even Omaha, sister cities, Des Moines. I mean, their wages in a lot of cases are better than our wages. So some of it is a wage growth thing too in our city.
Yeah.
Where I'm challenging the private sector to say, listen, you want to keep the Roberts of the world in his position. You want to keep your people. You're going to also have to create jobs with wages that they want to move here for, and that they want to graduate from Augie or USF or Southeast and stay here for. So the private sector's got to do their part too, with what they're doing to make their position attractive. Third piece, then. We already talked about it, is transparency, communication, and a different leadership style. I mean, I have a very different leadership style, I think, than our current administration. Good, bad, or otherwise, it's just different, and it's very inclusive. I'm very much a consensus building guy. I realize that I know what I don't know. I'm not a politician. I'm not a city councilor or ex-city councilor. So I come into the mayor's office with, Monday'd be a clean slate. I don't have preconceived notions about development and planning, about streets, I'm coming into it open, eyes wide open. And I think there's something refreshing to that. I've managed large budgets and I've managed, large work teams. So I'm not just coming in as some newbie, but I am new to government. And I think to a lot of people, That's very refreshing. Now they say, well, our current mayor is a business guy too. And he says I run City Hall like a business, and he had a business background. And I say, it's very true. There are a lot of different ways to run a business, though. A lot of different ways to run a business.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the measure of success for any politician, you can look back and you can say, is Sioux Falls better off today than it was 8 years ago? And honestly, I think it is. And I think most people would say that it is.
Yeah.
You'd have a hard time saying it's not. And so, from that aspect, I give Mayor Huther a lot of credit for the things we've gotten done, things that we had talked about for many years, that he said, okay, on my watch, we're going to push this through and we're going to get it done. I didn't always agree with how he got it done, but he got it done. And he got a lot of things done.
His legacy will be complex, I think.
It will be complex. I think you're absolutely right. So the next mayor is going to have to kind of swing the pendulum back a little bit from probably these bonded quality of life projects we've invested into wastewater and infrastructure, and workforce development and things that they aren't quite as sexy, as a premier center and a city admin building and things like that. But they're very, very necessary parts of a growing community.
Yeah, storm sewer in your basement's not sexy either.
It's not. Yeah, right. So I guess those are the three main ones that I want to talk about on here. But the rest is, if you go to TenHakenForMayor.com and look at that 2026 plan, that gets into more detail about the issues about infrastructure and diversity and public transportation and challenges like that.
Sure. Let's see, and a few of these that you've already touched on a few of these a little bit, but a few of them are going to come up here in the rest of these listener questions. For example, this one you've touched on quite a bit there. Other than expanding police, what would you do proactively to combat rising crime?
Yeah. Well, I did talk. I mentioned that, but I think it's also important, and I don't like to share this a lot because I don't want to be labeled as this like political wonk or political insider. But I have good relationships with Marty Jackley and Christy Nome and Senator Rounds and Senator Thune, and I've been in and around politics. My company, we did a lot of political work. I worked with some of those candidates on their campaigns, and I don't hide from that. We've done Republican political work. I share that because it's going to be very important for the next mayor to also have strong relationships with our state and federal delegation, because that's when you can really get stuff done. When you can lobby our federal delegation, say, hey, this is what we're really needing. We got a meth problem in Sioux Falls. We need some federal funding for this treatment center that I want to build that will serve the eastern half of the state or the western half of the state. And I know Marty Jackley, when I heard him talk yesterday at our city council, he was talking about that concept. And so those relationships, with our state and federal delegation, I think are important to have in helping move stuff forward, specifically with this crime issue. And then also, the police just need to feel empowered and supported. And I think in some ways, our police department, which is we got a fantastic PD. I mean, we got a fantastic police department, but in some ways, I think they don't feel fully supported by the administration. Whether that's perception or reality, some of it's probably a little both.
And I recall last year with the contract negotiations and things like that, which are always contentious between an administration and their, municipal employees. But there was a little extra tension. It felt like there at the end of last year, I believe. Yeah,
there was, and that was. I think the big thing for me was there was a back pay issue that the negotiations drug out, and when they finally got settled on the cost of living increase, the back pay that was due them based on when that should have been retroactive was withheld by the city, and that was a very flag in the sand type decision to me, because even though it cost the city X amount of money, I think it was like $70,000, it was symbolic in a way. To if you support the PD, it's like you gotta find a way to make that back pay and make those men and women in blue feel like they win in this thing.
Yeah, and I recall at the time on the podcast I mentioned that I thought that was a petty move, but yeah.
Yeah, I would concur in that. It's like that would have really been great if we could have found that money somewhere else to make that happen. To say you guys are $70,000 important to the city. is how I would kind of look at that.
Alrighty. Let's see. How will you ensure that Sioux Falls is a community that welcomes people of all walks of life? And examples they list are LGBTQ, immigrant, refugee, etc.
Sure. So the diversity of our city is it's pretty incredible, and it's depending on where you're. I have kids. Where your kids go to school, some people see it more than others. But I think the data is like a third of our school district, kids are of non-Caucasian, background, and our general population is only like 80-some%. So the diversity's coming up through the school system, and it's only going to grow in the city. I grew up in Worthington, Minnesota, as I think I mentioned that, which is a really diverse city, and people laugh at that. They're like, "Oh, you being a smart aleck?" I'm like, "No, based on school district data, I believe it's the most diverse city in Minnesota, with a lot of Laotians, a lot of Sudanese, and a lot of Vietnamese." And growing up in Worthington, I taught English as a second language when I was in high school. And I taught it to this guy named Fook. He was my guy. And Fook worked at the Campbell soup plant in Worthington, defeathering chickens. And Fook wanted to be able to speak better and more intelligently to his line supervisor. That was why he told me he wanted to learn English. And I said, here's a guy that has moved his family over here to, at that time, work a $9 an hour job was probably what was paying $8.
Yeah.
To pull feathers, to defeather chickens. And he wants to learn English so he can better communicate with his supervisor when he's, elbows deep.
I mean, that's the American story, man.
Oh,
How far back do you have to go? Probably not too far back. I know for mine, less than 100 years, or for your family to find a descendant the exact same story, where didn't speak that much English, but they were scrappy and worked hard and built something.
So I have a huge heart for the immigrant population. But that being said, we also need to make sure that we as a community are doing our part to help assimilate and make immigrants successful in this community. And not just say, oh yeah, we welcome everybody. Well, the welcoming is the easy part. Then you got the hard part of teaching them English as a second language, helping them navigate our social system, helping them get driver's licenses, help get them in the faith community, help them with the school district, help them understand the cultural differences here. I mean, it's hard to assimilate. And someone said it to me like this, like, Paul, if you got dropped in Somalia tomorrow and someone said, hey, there's like 4 Americans who live over on the west side of the city, they eat hamburgers, they watch Wheel of Fortune, and they they have their little, I'd be like, dude, that's where we're going to go over there, because those would be our people. And so I don't disparage the immigrants for having these pocketed communities where they stick together.
It's a classic migration pattern.
It's a classic migration pattern. So I think we also have to do a better job saying, okay, this isn't Vietnam. We will still recognize your Vietnamese cultures, but it's not how we do it here. We have different laws here. We have different traditions here that you're here in Sioux Falls now, and we have to do a better job of making you assimilate to what we have here. So I love immigrants. I'll be welcoming of immigrants, but I'll say it's our responsibility not just to welcome, but we have to help them become productive members of our society as well.
Okay. Let's see. How would you work to get more living wage jobs in Sioux Falls? And once again, this is one you touched a little bit on the goals, but if you wanted to say anything further on the living wage topic.
Yeah. Living wage, and living wage means different things to different people. And we actually had that asked at a forum once. Vernon Brown kind of was pinning us in the corner saying, specifically, I need a specific, what do you consider a living wage? And honestly, anything less than $15 an hour, I mean, $15 an hour, if you're working a 40-hour week, that's a $30K job. Anything less than that, it's hard to live off. It's hard to have an apartment,
Oh, yeah.
$750 a month, and maybe if you have one kid in daycare and then you're paying health insurance out of that, and so. But sometimes I talk to employers who are saying, "Oh, we have workforce challenges. Paul, what are you going to do to address workforce challenges?" If you and I said, "Well, what? Tell me about these jobs." Well, we have tons of open jobs. I said, "What? Tell me about them." Well, these are good jobs. Well, these are $11, $12, $13 an hour jobs. They say to me, and I said, "Well, That's why you have so many jobs open. Because those aren't jobs that people are going to move here from Tallahassee, or Nashville to come to Sioux Falls for those jobs. So you want to fill those jobs, you got to figure out how to pay them a wage that is a living wage and is a realistic wage. So I am not for a mandated minimum wage increase or anything like that. I mean, that's typically state level legislative stuff. I believe in the free market economy, but you'll appreciate this as a tech nerd. I mean, when DocuTap got Series B funding, or they got some private equity funding or something, they got a lot. It was like $25 million. Well, they went out paying their software guys and gals. They jack it up because they needed talent, so they were offering higher wages. So what did that do to us at ClickRain? Well, we had to say, okay, we probably have to accelerate the wages of our team a little bit more quickly, because someone in the market now has forced us to do that.
Yeah.
And that's how the market works.
Yes, it is.
That's it. So in some ways, one of the best things that could happen would be someone coming to our market and bringing $17 an hour jobs, and forcing some of these others to say, okay, we need to compete now, or we have to deal with attrition and losing these people.
Very good. Now, this question is a little bit of a kind of a lark on behalf of the podcast crew here, but we're asking it of all the candidates, so just bear with me on this one. It's a bit of a story. Okay, you're driving down a dark road on a stormy night. You're groggy, your vision is getting a little blurry, and as you round the corner, you see a squirrel in the middle of the road playing a tiny magic glass flute. Now, do you swerve and take the ditch and miss the squirrel, or do you hit the squirrel?
What does the flute have to do with that? Well, honestly, you know what? I have swerved into many a ditch to miss every single type of animal. So I'm probably in the ditch on that one.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Very good.
A glass flute. I love it.
Let's see. What? And then this is the final question here.
Okay.
Why should I vote specifically for you over any other candidate running for this office?
Great question. And we have 6 candidates. So people have options, and we have good candidates. People have good options. I feel really excited about the future of our city. I think the number one quality and the number one characteristic of a strong mayor and a good mayor for the city is someone who's a good leader. The job number one of a mayor is to be a leader. You have to lead the 1,300 employees of City Hall. You have to lead the 8 councilors. You have to lead the 185,000 people of the city. And you have to build consensus and say, hey, I don't expect you to agree with everything, but you have to get the people rallied behind you and say, okay, he's wrong on some things, he's right on some things, but he is a good leader, and he's moving us forward overall. And so I feel that I have a very strong background in the skills and the requirements that you need to be a good leader. And what I often describe is I see Sioux Falls as having 4 main quadrants. You have your business community, you have your nonprofit and your faith community, your churches. We have a very strong church community in Sioux Falls. And then demographically, you have your young people and your older people. Okay, those are 4 just key groups in the city. I kind of sit at the middle of that intersection. I've been in business, been in the business community, I've grown a multi-million-dollar company, served on buku boards. I'm the chair of the Zeal Center for Entrepreneurship right now. I have a strong connection in the faith community and the nonprofit community. From a lot of board work, a lot of work I've done in this community. I don't run from the fact that I'm a faith-based guy. Some people want to throw stones at me for that. It's my DNA. That's who I am. I'm old enough that I can relate to this older segment of the population. Got the salt and pepper coming through. I mean, I've weathered a few storms, and I can relate to the 60, 70, 80-year-old in our community who's concerned about crime. They want to figure out how they get their grandkids and kids to come back here. Get it. Understand that. But then young enough that the millennials and the young people And having worked and built a company with those sorts of people, I can relate to as well. So if you look at who can rally the biggest group of people in the city to move Sioux Falls forward, I feel like I'm kind of uniquely positioned with all those groups to build consensus, to get people excited, and to move the city forward.
Very good. Paul, where can people learn more about you?
So, easiest way is my website, tenhakenformayor.com, but like many things in today's culture, Facebook's really a fantastic source of where you get the day-to-day operations of what's going on in the campaign, where's Paul at, what's he doing. So you just search TenHaken for Mayor on Facebook and like my Facebook page, and it's a good way to follow. So let's see, today's the 14th, so 26 days, 25 days, depending on how you look at it. We're going to the polls on April 10, and then we will likely have a runoff that will happen on May 1. And my biggest takeaway for the listeners is municipal elections matter. They're very important to the city. Municipal elections impact your day-to-day life, your libraries, your public safety, your taxes. You want a premier center, the things like that are decided at your municipal level. So the fact that we only get about a third turnout for municipal elections kind of bums the guy out.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see, with some younger candidates like myself and Jolene Letcher, hopefully we're bringing some fire of a younger group to say, hey, I want to get out and vote this time.
Speaking of, the registration deadline is the 24th of March, I believe.
26th.
26th. Oh, yep.
26th. Same day
26th.
Early voting starts too.
Yep.
So early voting will start on the 26th.
So get registered.
Get registered, yes. And if you are registered, a lot of people I've found that they don't know about early voting and how sweet early voting is.
That's pretty sweet.
The Election Day rush, you got 2 weeks from the 26th to the 10th to pop down to the county administration building and vote. And so it's a great way to save time. It's a great way to beat rush. Make sure if something comes up on Election Day, kids are sick or you get a flat tire or whatever it is, to make sure you get out and vote.
Very good. Well, Paul, thank you for joining us, and good
thanks,
luck.
Robert.